Hi, and welcome back to the Positive Prepper. I've decided for this video to step away from the normal news and things like that. You can't get fully away from it, but what I've decided to do for the next few videos is go through some lists. People tend to like the bullet points. And so I'm starting this off with 10 things you should be preparing for, but they're not the things that you would normally think about. So, for example, the power grid going down is not one of the 10 things you should be preparing for. Obviously, you should be preparing for it, but it's not on this list. These are things that a lot of people really don't think in the context of prepping. Some of them are, but to a different degree, I think. So, number one, prepare for mass layoffs. AI is really taking over a lot of jobs in the market. So many people are finding out that they are no longer needed at their place of employment. That's going to make it really difficult to attain jobs in some specific sectors. Because if they're not using AI, they're going to have a very large pool of people to pull from and very few positions open. What makes this even more challenging is that a lot of employers have ghost jobs that they're posting in the papers. And then, looking for applicants, and then the reality is these positions don't exist. They're just trying to look like they are really thriving and that they're trying to help the community by hiring more people. But the reality is those jobs don't exist. So the consequence of that is that a lot more people are going to be reliant upon the system if they're unable to find alternative employment that is able to pay the bills at the level of lifestyle that they were living. So that's going to be really challenging. And this is one of the hallmarks of some of these other things I'm going to be talking about as we get further down the list. So I think all of these in quite a few ways are pretty intertwined. So, number 2, prepare for a dumber society. I didn't know how else to word this. This was like what came to my head, so it's what I used. Many in the younger generations, they don't know how to read an analog clock. They don't know how to give you change back unless they have their cell phone, right? Or some sort of technology. They don't know how to communicate with real people. They're relying on technology to be their friend and their guide, instead of the parents and the people in the community that really could make a difference in their lives. And then they also can't, they're more reliant on their parents for sure. And then, when I talk about this, I know that people out there are going to be like, oh, we're not all that way. No, I know you're not all that way. But many of these generations are. They don't want to work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. I've noticed a lot of the older people are having to work the late shifts because kids would rather be home gaming, or being an influencer or whatever, instead of working a full-time job and then doing that stuff after, right? And so we have to prepare for that, believe it or not. We have to be ready to interact with people that are not on the same level as we are. And that can be very frustrating. We need to prepare for growing unrest. So again, Minnesota's a great example of how much these peaceful protesters get away with. It's unbelievable, in my opinion. And of course, because a lot of those protesters are paid, it's not going to go away anytime soon. I think that this is probably going to get more out of control as spring comes in and the temperatures warm up and more of the snow goes away. I think if you live in a city and you can work remotely, get to your summer cabin out in the middle of nowhere so that you're not having to deal with this kind of stuff. I mean, how are they getting away with even blocking cars? And here's the hypocrisy, right? So they don't want voter ID, but they're going to check your license, unlawfully detain you to look at your license to see if you belong in that neighborhood. I can't think of a better example of hypocrisy. But I think that this is going to grow. So that's something that we need to prepare for, especially because I don't know when anti-protesters are going to start setting up camp across the street. And this is going to, could bring about some more conflict, personal conflict in between people. And hopefully it does not become more deadly because of that. But there's definitely going to be more instances between law enforcement and individuals. So that's something that you're going to want to prepare for. Number 4, prepare for abstract illnesses. It's not only possible, but it's very probable that unknown chemicals are being put into the air that we breathe, and thus falling on the water that we drink. I find it really ironic that while the government is trying to take these chemicals out of the foods that we eat, they have no problem with other chemicals being sprayed in the air that we breathe. Again, it's pretty hypocritical. I remember back before 2020 when there was it was an undefined upper respiratory illness is what they called it. And then these are going to become more prevalent, and God forbid, but they could become more deadly depending on what they put in it and who's putting it in the air. And I'm also going to add in here the arrival of people who are, they just kind of go off the deep end, because if 6G becomes a thing in America this year, it's very possible that people are just going to go nuts. And if you saw the video I put out, I don't know if it was the last or the one before, this will make sense to you. We have to prepare for this. You have to prepare for these abstract illnesses that either make people sick or go crazy, at the same time that they're telling us that they are trying to make America healthy again. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. Prepare, and along with the chemicals that they're putting in the air, we have to prepare for more seemingly natural disasters. So with the advent of this new technology, our weather is changing, and it continued to be blamed on, climate change, but they just keep messing with our weather. Like I said in my last video, in April, they're even going to try to reflect the sun's rays from the earth. And every time that they try to mess with the weather, something happens. So it's going to get worse. There are tornadoes and hurricanes and flooding and droughts and volcanic activity and earthquakes. A lot of that has to do with the sunspots, the solar activity. I'm well aware of that. But I also know that there are at least 100 weather stations that do things to our climate, whether it's cloud seeding or whatever, that are messing with the weather and taking it out of its normal weather patterns. So we want to prepare for those. Number 6, prepare for outbreaks of deadly viruses. And this is different than the illnesses. This one, again, I can't put my finger on this one for sure, but I think that somewhere in the world, an anti-American country's government is going to give the okay for somebody to put something airborne that is going to affect either the United States or one of our allies. We're already hearing about labs that were broken into, but we never hear about what was actually taken because they don't want us to know what's in these labs. Well, it's easy to look up the patents that America has, and it's quite frightening. But at some point, those missing vials are going to turn up in highly populated areas. And that's definitely going to create some death and destruction wherever that may be. Again, we pray that this stuff doesn't happen, but we have to prepare for it. Okay. Number 7, we have to prepare for an overloaded legal system. Now, this one's kind of out there in left field from the rest of the, I guess, the theme of the rest of them. But I do think that this could cause some problems, especially for people with legitimate issues that they need to bring through the legal system. The line between freedom of speech and legal interference is sharpening, right? But there's also a line between freedom of speech and people's feelings of entitlement to be offended. So people that are in those areas feel even more entitled and even more sensitive to words. So I think that this is going to result in more people being wrongfully charged with saying things that are discriminatory or any kind of ists, racist, sexist, whatever. I think that people are going to start being held legally liable, even though, so the words that we say aren't going to be different, but the way that they're taken is going to be different. And I think that the legal system, if it continues on the path that it's on, is going to let some of these legal cases continue, even though, it's just because somebody was offended. It wasn't because anything was meant. And I hate defining it this way, but I'm not going to apologize for it either, because I see this happening in a lot more of the blue areas than I do the red. And I don't want to use that structure, but I think it is the reality, because the blue areas are the ones that tend to have the more entitled behaviors and the more inability to handle difference of opinion or the language that people use. So you have to prepare for that. So if you have a legitimate legal case, it might be held up, because I do think that there's going to be more people just suing left and right, getting something free. Number 8, prepare for more mass casualty events. We know that, especially in soft zones like schools and churches, these mass incidences have been increasing. But I think this is going to happen even more, and not just in those soft zones. People are getting fed up with everything in society. And if you add to that the joblessness that a lot of people are going to be facing, the illnesses, the rising medical bills, people are going to start getting desperate, and that's going to come out somewhere. And I have to say, thanks mainstream media for perpetuating this. I was watching our local news, and I've been watching it typically in the mornings just to get the weather. But I've noticed, and we get our news from the cities, from Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I've noticed that when they talk about these peaceful protests, they never go ask an ICE agent how they feel about it. They never ask a pro-ICE supporter what they think about it. They only ask the protesters. So again, even on your local news, you are only hearing one side of it, and that is not helping. I do think that these mass casualty events are going to continue. I think people are just going to have an issue with a certain group of people, and they're going to go take it out on them. I do also think that some of these soft zones are going to be better guarded by law-abiding citizens who are going to make a stronger stand. Unfortunately, when law-abiding citizens make a stand and do something about it, they're not always applauded for it. So people have to make that decision for themselves, what they're willing to do. But I would prepare for these kind of events. Kind of along the same vein, and this one is really hard for me to talk about, and it breaks my heart. But I think we have to prepare for more instances of abuse, suicide, and homicides in the homes. So like murder-suicides. This is really hard, but I think society is at a boiling point. Families have had it really hard the last 5 years. Like really hard. They've been very stressed. Especially the low income, and this, it's not just the high prices of food, but it's the job insecurity. It's the division between communities and families. It's addictions to drugs and alcohol and technology. The lack of strong supportive networks. Remember that now it's fashionable to not be, it's fashionable to walk away from your parents and eliminate them from your lives. So a lot of these young people don't have that supportive network. And then they're inundated with that stress in the news. It's always bad news. And because parents are really loaded with this responsibility of taking care of their family in all of these dynamics, it's more difficult for them to take care of their children. So this distress ultimately can lead to the loss of a loved one by the hands of a loved one. People just don't seem to be as strong as they used to be. During the Great Depression and both World Wars, people had to learn to adapt and survive, environments that we can only imagine what they were like. But today, it seems easier to take the permanent way out instead of just asking for help or trying to adapt and doing what needs to be done. And then a lot of times, unfortunately, children are the victims of very weak parents who don't know how else to release that stress. And I would also add in this that a lot of people probably would sell their children to make ends meet or to make money because they feel entitled to it. So what I would say about that is go check on your neighbors, check on your community people, and make sure that everybody has the support that they need. We're all in this together, and we need to be there for each other. And then lastly, prepare for a change in the world that will impact everyone. I couldn't put my finger on this one. If you ask, what are you actually talking about? And I would tell you I have no idea what this looks like. But in my gut and the people that I've talked to, something's happening. Something tangible is changing. And it could be a hugely religious event. It could be another major war. It could be a truly deadly virus that's unleashed, like a pandemic again. It could be the complete breakdown of civil life. I don't know what it is. But I feel like there's something changing in the world, and it's going to negatively impact everyone. But just remember that if you're prepared for the smaller things, most likely you're going to have what you need to get through the bigger things. So don't freak out and panic. Again, this is just about thinking differently about some of the things that you need to prepare for and what that looks like for you and your family or you and your MAG group. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. If you have anything else that's kind of, like I said, not I don't want to think about like power outages. I want to do things that people don't normally think about. So put that in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear what you think about these 10 that I thought about. Please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. That is really, really important. And I'll have these other 5 videos out in the next couple days. So hit that notification bell so that you know when they've been released. So stay safe, stay vigilant, and God bless.